Greetings from the 2021 DEMA show in Las Vegas. We're coming to you virtually from Lionfish University, Lionfish Universe, Netless Catch, Lionfish Patrol, Lionfish Everything. And we have some very distinguished guests to give you an update on the past year in the Lionfish Universe, including all the way from Turkey. So join us for the next few minutes, and I'll turn it over to my co-founder of Lionfish University, Stacy Frank. Thank you for coming.
All right. Welcome, everybody. And thank you so much to all the panelists today for their time and their expertise and updating us about what's going on with the lionfish invasion. And just a quick rundown on our distinguished panelists today. We'll be starting with Scott Ganello, who is the founder of Lionfish Central, which is a nonprofit aimed at helping other nonprofits that are fighting the lionfish invasion. And he also is the creator of the Lionfish Patrol app, and he'll be talking to us about that down the road here. Then we'll be going to Dr. Candelmo and Dr. Gittings. Dr. Gittings is the lead scientist for the NOAA National Marine Sanctuary System. And Dr. Candelmo is the Conservation Science Manager of Reef Environmental Education Foundation. And they both have quite a lot of experience in lionfish trap research, and they'll be updating us on that. Then we'll be going to Dr. Eileen Ullman in Turkey, and she is the incentive expert for the United Nations Development Program on Marine Invasive Species. And she also was the founder of Mercy Consulting. And she'll be giving us an overall update about all the things that are happening in the Mediterranean right now with lionfish. Then we're going to Alex Fogg, who is also at DEMA right now, and he is a marine biologist and a coastal resource manager for the Destin Fort Walton Beach, Okaloosa County, Florida. And he will be updating us on what's going on with Derbies and with lionfish lesions. And then we also will be going to Anthony Valulis. And thank you, Anthony, for running our Zoom session today. We really appreciate that. And he is the founder of Ola Coral and Netless Catch, and he'll be updating us on what's happening there. So off to Scott live at DEMA for his update about his Lionfish Patrol app and how you all can help out with that. So take it away, Scott. Unmute yourself there, and we're ready.
Thank you, Stacy, and welcome to DEMA 2021 here in beautiful Las Vegas. So if it's a little noisy, there's some background mute sounds. Sorry about that, but we're live from DEMA. So I'm the founder of Lionfish Central. We are a 50c3 charitable organization, and our mission is simple. We want to evaluate, educate, eradicate invasive lionfish from our reefs, and we do that with a whole host of things. And on the next slide, I'll show you how. We work with, not only do we do web development, search engine work, advertising, all the geeky stuff to help other organizations succeed, but we also have an app called Lionfish Patrol, free on the app stores, and it's open to anything in the lionfish community. We also just launched a lionfish podcast to talk to divers from around the world and other lionfish efforts. And finally, we have a really fun lionfish hunting video game, which is a conservation game, inspired by Dr. Gittings and how we decided how to give the point structure by saving reef and losing points for coral hitting and that kind of stuff. So on the next slide, I want to talk about what we do with the app. It's really about the data collection. Yes, it's a fun app for divers. They get to keep a dive log and they can show off all their fish they've caught, but they're giving us valuable information. So we can actually find hotspots in certain areas. And there's all sorts of reports. And we're in more than 20 countries right now, from the Eastern Mediterranean down as far as Venezuela, Colombia, up to the Northeast and throughout the Gulf. So it's off to a really great start. It's less than a year old, and we're getting some valuable data. And on the next slide, we can talk about some of that, right? But how do you get the app? First of all, it's free for everybody, and it's available on every device. So if you don't have a smartphone, you can get it on the computer or a tablet or from the App Store for your phone, Google or Apple. And it's basically open to everybody. And on the next slide, please. These are some of the charts that we're pulling out. On a global scale, there's global numbers, how many fish are being caught, where in the regions, all sorts of great information. Then there's regional, so we can break it down by the Caribbean and every country within that. And then there's local, right down to the cities within those countries. And then there's individual. So we have leaderboards for every lionfish hunter on the app, and you can see where they are and get all this information from that. And the information they provide us helps us find better solutions. Next slide, please. So it's real simple. You go to the App Store, you download it, it's free, and you set up an account. Divers, trappers, NGOs, businesses, observers, everyone's part of the solution now. Next slide. So basically for the divers and the trappers, you add your catch. It's actually quicker to add your catch total on the app than it is to spear a lionfish and put it in a zookeeper. And I actually worked with Dr. Gittings from NOAA to develop the trapper account. So now when they're trapping, using these traps, you can actually enter the data there. So soak time, distance from the reef, types of structure underneath, all the information that Dr. Gittings wanted for learning about these traps is also part of this app now. And the good news is the divers and the trappers can keep a dive log going forward with all their catch totals. So they can actually go back in time and see where they caught the most fish, look at their private notes, find out what that GPS coordinate is if they want to have it, or their chart plot code, whatever they want. So that it's a running log. Next slide, please. So the beauty of this is now you can communicate with everybody in the lionfish industry. So it's a kind of a global communication, and you can find different divers like Fabio here on the left, who's caught over 900 or 895 lionfish so far, and he's from Honduras. So you can message him directly, you know, I'm coming out to Honduras, let's catch up, or I got some information, I want some information from you, I need some, whatever it is you want, you can actually communicate with them. And you can also look at their dive log. So on the right, Salty Spines here, the Slayer, she has all her dive logs, and you can actually click into every one that she's put, look at the picture, look at the depth, look at the bottom time, look at the structure, time of day, a lot of information. And again, you can reach out to them as well. Next slide, please. So the bottom line is it's a global lionfish directory. Businesses, jewelry makers, dive shops, dive charters, restaurants, chef, everybody can be part of this. And as Lionfish Patrol on the app, we will then market them all to help find the places you want to go. We get a lot of calls from the Midwest asking us where's a good place to go lionfish hunting, and let's say in South Carolina. So we can actually connect them quicker and better through the app. And everybody on the app is now part of the solution, and it's free. Next slide, please. So my stuff's pretty simple. In the last year, we've produced an app, we've produced a video game, we just launched a podcast, and we're working with other countries. We've been to Belize a couple of times, working with some nonprofits there, and we're trying to make a difference through the work we do. And yeah, thank you. And if you want any more information, go to any of the websites or reach out to me direct. And I will leave it back to you guys because I'm going to get busy here at DEMA and get back to the show. So thank you for your time.
Hey, thank you, Scott, so much. Have a great rest of the show. Appreciate that. And everybody sign up for his app. It's free. It's great. It'll help save the reefs.
It's
all right,
free
so
at the
now
App Store.
we are off to, oh yeah, free at the App Store. Sign up. Okay, now we're going to go, bye Scott. We're going to go to Dr. Gittings, and Dr. Candelma to hear an update, the latest on trap research.
Okay, thanks, Stacy. My screen showing well? So thanks, Scott, for that, for giving me some credit for helping you with the app. But, you know, regarding the traps and the addition of the trap section to the app, really appreciate that happening. And I'll give you an update on where the traps are, and Allie will help as well. She'll talk about a study that's going on now. But the traps, you won't find them yet on Amazon, and they're not stuck on a cargo carrier off Los Angeles, but they are in continual development ever since really 2013, when we first had this idea about making traps for lionfish. but we're constantly improving them. And that's what I'm going to do, bring you up to date on the improvements that we've been making. From the earliest days of the traps in 2013, 14, they were clunky, big, bulky things that couldn't fit well on boats. So, but these were just prototypes to prove the concept back in 2014. We've gone way beyond that since then by improving and simplifying the traps. But you know, this is what they used to look like back in the days when we were just proving the concept of a non-containment trap, a trap that doesn't hold the lionfish until the moment it's pulled up, but they're attracted to these central devices called FADs, fish attraction devices. And they were clunky as well. So big fat things, complex and so forth. We thought we needed a lot of complexity to attract lionfish. Turned out not to really be the case. But we did find that lionfish were coming to the traps, but hanging on around the outer edges of them. So we thought we needed to remove all the outer structures around the perimeter of the trap and simplify them to the point where lionfish would just be attracted all the way to the center of the trap. And then we could catch them by putting this curtain of netting around them. So we put together an idea of a dome trap here, a big half circle type trap, or a half sphere really, when it's closed. And while that worked better, it still was hard to pull through the water because it's horizontal through the water column. And it still had these big clunky FADs in the middle. We wanted to remove those, and we tried several different ways to do it. Eventually we came up with the idea of a folding trap that looks like a clamshell. And that, with some special additions that help it spring open when it hits the bottom, turned out to be the real solution to the whole problem of making it go fast through the water, and as well stacking a bunch of them on a fishing boat so you can take a lot of traps with you anytime you went fishing. So this clamshell design really hit the mark when it came to solving all these other problems. And it's proven very effective in terms of attracting lionfish with a very simple FAD. You can see there, it's just a sheet of plastic in the middle, a lattice work. Turns out that's all you really need, some vertical structure, and lionfish will come to it. So overall, they were very effective. We went through a whole bunch of different types of FADs that would collapse and fall and go flat, so we could stack them on fishing boats. Some were big, fat, like foldable Christmas tree looking mesh, wire mesh things. But in the end, like I said, we ended up with these really simple little structures like this, with a couple different, still some different potential designs that we could test. But we started working with a company out in Ohio that makes all this lattice. And they contacted me when they saw an AP story on the traps and said, hey, you're using our stuff. So let us help you with these traps. So now they're helping us by supplying FADs and actually helping trying to improve the FADs and strengthen them by adding some edging around the traps. I mean, the FADs. So we're still evolving there. Regarding another part of the traps that was overly complex in the early days, and we're simplifying it. This is one of the hinges that we used on one of the dome traps. And you can see how complex and difficult that would be to make for somebody without welding skills and cutting skills and all that. So we felt like we really needed to simplify these traps. The first thing we did was just weld a simple metal tab on the edges of the frames and then pass the frame through that to create the hinge point so that you could fold these clamshell traps flat. But then a really ingenious guy named Peter Angelotti said, what if we could get rid of these welds altogether and just bend the rebar into a point where the loops could create the hinge? And I said, let's go for it. Let's try it. And we really had some good luck there, because bending does work well on rebar up to a point. There are some micro cracks when you bend them too tightly. So we have to figure out that problem. But maybe heating the metal before bending it is the answer there. So down in Richmond, a guy named Mark Moran and then Sal DeLello and some others organized a workshop, a bending workshop, so we could make some traps using this new bending technique, which is really simple. You just have to have a bender that looks like this, and it's quickly and easy to make these traps because you can create really tight loops around these mandrels and use those as the hinges. Now we would trim that and make it look nicer than it looks right there, but this is in the process of being bent. And you can see how nice you can make these tight spirals for the traps. This is what the traps look like when they're just the frames are bent together, and you're using the loops as the hinges. And quite simple to make. Anybody could make it almost anywhere with just the simplest of materials and tools. This one could be cleaned up a bit because that's not a straight bend you see there where it goes around almost in a spiral form. That should be straightened out. But that's easy to do. We can fix this to make it a perfectly bent. And so we put together designs and now some instructions on how to do this that I'm cleaning them up right now, and hopefully they'll be available really soon so anybody can just take them and follow the instructions and make your own frames. And there's Peter getting ready right now. This was from this morning. He was out welding, getting ready for me to come down and Allie to come down probably next month to make a series of traps that we're going to be using in some tests that Allie will talk about. So I'm going to leave it there and let Allie take it. Stacy, are you still there?
I'm still here.
Okay.
Okay, I'm just sharing my screen. Sorry. Too many things up there.
There we go. Alrighty.
Okay. You guys can see it. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So Steve and I have been working together on with a number of other partners that I'll talk about on a NOAA Salt and Still Kennedy research program funded grant that is looking at testing these non-containment Gittings traps down in the Florida Keys, with the primary goal to utilize the expertise of the Florida Keys lobster fishermen for learning the best way to deploy these traps effectively and target deepwater lionfish populations in the Florida Keys. The lobster fishermen have already been removing lionfish for over a decade with their lobster traps. So we're trying to hone in on that expertise and see how these traps that have less bycatch than the lobster traps can play a role in the removal of the deepwater populations. And so the goal of the project is to figure out the best design and deployment strategy for these traps in the deep water habitats. We're talking about, trying to get the traps down to deep reefs, hitting them on target, avoiding sort of sailing through the current and moving once they hit the bottom. So we're going to be working with them to adjust the weight and the buoyancy of the traps. We've spoken to another scientist at Bermuda, Tim Noyes, and they had some issues with the traps opening on the deep reefs, and they played around with adding some weight to the frame of the traps in various spots, and also little bars to wedge the trap open on the way down to ensure deployment success. So we'll work on some of those designs. We've looked at the FAD design and have determined that the more open thatch is probably a bit better for drag resistance in those high current habitats. And then we'll be looking at escapement and closing speed as we pull the traps up, trying to determine if the lionfish are getting out before the trap closes. And then finally, we'll be determining if the traps should be fished in a single or trawl design. So whether they'll be sort of tied together in a line of traps as they do with the lobster traps, or just deployed singly. The trawl design would be most effective. It would be quicker and easier with less lines going to the surface, but there's going to be some modifications that have to be made to the way that they pull the traps. It won't be exactly the same as the way they do the lobster traps. So all of those things, we'll be working with both the lobster fishermen as well as the FWC lobster research team. So we'll be out on their vessel initially, and we have been going out, testing out various designs to see first, what we have to do with the different weights, how many buoys we need to attach to the traps in order for them to stay in place, what design that we want to make to use initially. We've been tweaking the design a bit to lessen the amount of loose netting that's on the traps to eliminate entanglement risk of both the habitat as well as endangered species. And so from that, we've tested a number of different modifications and have come up with this slightly new baffle design, which is a stiffer plastic mesh along the bottom of the trap extends outside the frame and then is attached with just a small line of netting that allows the trap to still billow as it's closing, so the lionfish don't get scared out, but it doesn't have as much net to get entangled and risk capture of other, bycatch that we don't want to capture. And so over the next 2 years, we'll be tweaking this design and testing it at different reefs in the Florida Keys and seeing how effectively it can catch lionfish in those habitats. We've just sent 2 of our traps to the NOAA Southeast Fisheries Science Center in Pascagoula and at the Gear Research Branch, and they're donating their time to give us some ideas on how to fine tune that design, any other suggestions on how to rig the lines and eliminate catching of the lines as the traps are being deployed and pulled up. So I'm really looking forward to getting their feedback because they've been working with traps and gear. These are experts in the NOAA field for this type of equipment. So it'll be exciting to see what they come back with. So hopefully we'll actually get them out on the water with us as well once they've had some time to look at the traps and get a chance, because you really do need to see the traps in action to understand what you're working with, which I've discovered over the past 6 months or so. And then we've been lucky to have a number of other partners, including nonprofits like ReefSave and Lionfish University helping support the project. We've got local divers in the Florida Keys that are providing local knowledge as site knowledge, expertise on where we can go out to test these traps down in the Florida Keys, and then also introductions to the fishermen and the local community. And then out in the field, while we're deploying the traps, we want to make sure that they're opening and being retrieved successfully. And a lot of times if you don't have some sort of camera on them on the way up or down, you don't really know what's happening, because the trap may come up closed, but it may have been stuck open the whole time and just closed at the very end, or it maybe never even opened at the bottom. So we will be running ROV surveys as much as possible with the trap deployments to determine that the trap deployed successfully and was retrieved successfully, to look for escapement of lionfish, also to do surveys on the habitat type and try to get an assessment of what the lionfish population was like in the area before and after the deployment. So we can kind of combine all that data together to figure out how effective the traps really were. And if there was no lionfish down there at all, then it's not really the trap that is the issue. We just didn't target the right population. And at the same time, we'll also be attaching long-term programmable cameras and then GoPros as well with intervalometers on them, so we can record additional data while the trap is deployed, including habituation of lionfish, how quickly they recruit to the traps, how long that they stay there, what the optimal day of pulling the traps are, and optimum soak time. Been sort of suggested somewhere around a week, but maybe as short as 2 to 3 days. And midday is very likely the best time to pull the traps. From research that we've done, have shown that particularly in these deep reefs, if you get closer to the evening periods, the lionfish are really moving around a lot more, whereas midday they kind of hunker down in one spot. And so we want to find the optimal time to pull the traps up. And then also just determine if there's any other species available around that are interacting with the fish and what the behavior of the lionfish are. We will have probably a sound trap or an acoustic receiver down with some of the traps just to record, listen for lionfish calls, determine if that surveying technique can be utilized to determine if lionfish are in the area, and then maybe, depending if we can pair it with some of the video surveys, to look at both vocalization and behavior with the lionfish, see what the visibility is like down there though. And so with that, I'd like to thank particularly the NOAA Fisheries Salt and Salt Kennedy program for funding this research. We're really excited to jump into it this year. We've been sort of slowed down because of COVID. And then thanks to all the partners and everybody that's helping support the project. And then just a quick update on how my finger was after I got stung this year. I will say, try not to get stung under the nail of your finger, it led to a pretty nasty infection from lionfish, but it's survived. And I'll take that off the screen now. It's disgusting.
Oh, well, thank you very much, you guys, for that update. Yikes, Allie, I'm glad your finger's doing better. That was really interesting to see the evolution of this project, and hopefully this will result in a lot more lionfish being taken off the reefs and ending up on dinner plates. So thank you guys for all the work you are doing on that area. So now we are heading out to see Dr. Eileen Ullman here in Turkey and get an update on what's been going on in the Mediterranean, which has been a lot. Take it away, Eileen.
Thank you, Stacy. Great talk so far, everybody. So I was really lucky to meet this group from a friend of mine, Polly, that works in Belize. I used to work in Belize also, but the lionfish invasion just happened just after I left. So I was really interested in it and kept staying up to date on news about predators and how it evolved over there. So fast forward 10 years, we have a lionfish invasion in the Mediterranean and not much culling is going on. Currently, I'm working for the UNDP Turkey, who has lionfish as one of their top 3 priority species. So we are planning some preliminary control events, some derbies next year, which I'll give you some more details on in a little bit. With this project, we were hoping to come over as a Turkish team earlier this year and visit Belize, who is doing some advanced marine conservation over there, and attend a lionfish derby. But my team had visa issues, so I came over by myself and got to meet the group, and it was so wonderful to actually meet personalities because we don't get much of that in these Zoom meetings. So yeah, everybody in this team is so great in their unique individual way, and it's so great that this troublesome fish united us. So last year we had our first formal contribution together. There was an east to west scientific knowledge exchange that was led by UNDP Turkey. And from there, it became apparent that the biggest issue facing the Mediterranean is that scuba diving and culling is not allowed in most of the countries here. Most of the governments are scared that illegal fishing will be rampant and they will go and attack, go and spear some groupers or some protected species instead. So from that, we took a lead in writing a policy paper. So we are, actually, I think everybody in this group is involved, and we are learning your best lessons from the Western Atlantic invasion to apply them to the Eastern Mediterranean. So we can show policy advisors that there are many different ways they can actually make amendments that suit them, whether it be through specific NGOs or specific dive centers or whatever they feel comfortable with. They have a range of options, and you guys have, over 20 years of experience over there. So we're hoping to put that experience to good use over here and kind of expedite the policy changes so we can actually start controlling this species. So I want to say thank you to the team for reminding me what science is about, which is helping each other in some positive way and sharing your expertise. That's not really the case over here where I live, where people are more protective of their research, and hopefully we can give them a good injection of how it should be done. So back to the Mediterranean, the spreading is continuing and culling efforts are very low. Cyprus are the leaders over here. On both sides of the island, they have started culling efforts through NGOs. Specifically in the north, they are awaiting a formal policy decision where hopefully soon they will be allowed to hunt lionfish with scuba gear. And our friend Barak Ali Chechek is handling that. And I think they have the highest densities probably in the world, which will interest some of you Americans. We recently learned that from Big Blue Diving Center, there are two dive instructors who are culling at least once a week, and their catch per unit effort is about 150 fish per person per dive. And they have a great incentive that they make some money from this by selling the fish back to the customers for lunch. So they're doing lots of outreach. And on the other side of the island, the ReLionMed project is still continuing their efforts, although their project finish date is coming soon. So they're hoping they will still be allowed to do some culling efforts after that. But only one little island is really doing control efforts here. Fishers are still catching quite a few, and restaurants are developing, certainly in Turkey and in Greece. So that's pretty exciting. But Greece, Turkey, Lebanon, and Israel really need to adapt their policies to allow scuba diving. So hopefully our policy paper can help influence that. We also had another paper published this year on predators of pufferfish and lionfish. A lot of this team contributed to, and we learned lots of great stuff, especially that one of the biggest problems in the Mediterranean as well as the Caribbean are that lionfish are pretty much only eating native species. And that's a big problem for our native biodiversity that is rapidly declining. And that's probably because of prey naivety. So that's a little bit scary. Also, another thing in the Mediterranean that's a little bit different from the Western Atlantic invasion is that it's mostly females we're finding. And the females seem to be spawning all year round as well. So they're super happy, they're super big. And apparently they're here to stay, but hopefully we can start to control them a little bit. So with this policy paper, Ali has taken the lead in developing a really in-depth table on how different states in the Western Atlantic have changed and amended their policies. And this will hopefully be available soon on Lionfish University's website. And I think this will make a really great contribution. So I want to thank everyone for their help in that. Our next research contribution I am planning for us together will be to compare the biological and the ecological aspects of the two invasions. So as I was saying, we can compare, you know, their diets and the male to female content and their, we're just working on the last of the reproductive studies over here, and then we can start working on that. Coming up next year, in February, I was invited to speak by the ReLionMed project in Cyprus about this policy paper, which is a really great advancement because and a huge honor as well. Also, when you meet people in person, it changes the dynamic, and we all need more of that after the last 2 years of this COVID issue. Next, May 16th to the 19th, there will be a Lionfish conference in Bodrum, Turkey. Hopefully we will get a lot of you over here. And then with the United Nations Development Project, we are planning to conduct 2 derbies. Hopefully we can organize them near the conference time so many of you can come over and help with that. And I'm sure a lot of you are eager to get over to Cyprus and see how many you can spare in an hour and see if you can still find those really crazy high abundances. Maybe we can even start a tour group for Americans wanting to hunt all these crazy abundances. So yeah, next year, lots of things are happening over on this side. Hope to see many of you here and help us with our invasion. So thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you, Eileen, so much. And I have to, say on behalf of everyone that's involved collaborating that we've been just all happy to contribute what we're able to. And we're just so glad to see things moving forward. And thank you for coming to visit all of us in September. and being part of the documentary that we hope, I mean, East meets West in terms of the science with the lionfish invasion. And we do hope that that will help move some of these policy changes forward too. It's in editing right now, and we've all been working really hard on getting that finished up. So we will see that eventually. So thank you so much. I appreciate your time today. Now we're going to be going back to DEMA and back to Alex Fogg, who will update us on what's happening with derbies and also with the lionfish lesions that have been rather mysterious. Let's see what all is new there.
Awesome. Thanks, Stacy. I hope you guys can hear me. I'm
Oh,
sorry
you're
you
welcome.
can't see me, but you probably, it's probably for the best. So anyways, yep, I'm over here in Vegas right now for DEMA. I'm sitting in one of the lobbies, so I apologize if it's a little too loud. I'm going to be providing a brief update on lionfish derbies and some of the population monitoring specific to the ulcers that started popping up back in 2017, 2018. So first, I wanted to take a quick moment to recognize Florida Fish and Wildlife and all the support that they've put towards lionfish derbies and lionfish programs in general. This is a quick screen grab, or I guess a small table that shows the few derbies that happened back in 2021. As you can see, there's 5 lionfish specific derbies. These were derbies that were funded or supported by Florida Fish and Wildlife. There are also an additional 6 that were self-funded that were not associated with Florida Fish and Wildlife's programs. But this is actually quite a bit lower than what we're used to. Back in 2018, when we were really at the peak of the lionfish invasion or interest over here in the United States, there were more than 30 lionfish events that spanned really throughout the entire Gulf Coast and up the east coast of the United States. But I suspect that the reason that we've seen this decline is due to the COVID-19 virus that seemed to shut everything down for the last 2 years. But fortunately, we were able to get a few derbies underway in 2021, and we suspect that we're going to see a lot more in 2022. One thing I wanted to note from this slide is a derby that was hosted just last month in Pensacola, Florida, produced 4,200 fish, but what was probably most notable was the size of the smallest lionfish. It was a 25 millimeter lionfish, and I don't think I've seen one that small before in any of the derbies I've participated in. And here's a picture of it. It was tiny, and honestly, the picture doesn't really do it justice. I don't know if his fingernail looked really big or what, but it was very, very small, and it was actually difficult to measure. So if you recall from the last slide, you see that there's a number of derbies, but the majority of them are happening down in the Florida Keys or up in the Florida panhandles, calling this slide the North-South derbies. The Reef is the OG when it comes to lionfish derbies. They really started it all off, and we're really the only ones hosting derbies until later in the invasion. So they have one in the spring and one in the fall, and up in Northwest Florida, there's a spring and fall derby as well. They're hosted by 2 separate entities. Unfortunately, all the derbies were canceled back in 2020 due to COVID, but there were a number of derbies that happened this last year, including the spring and fall derbies in the Keys as well as the Florida Panhandle. So just to talk about an event that I'm most familiar with, the Emerald Coast Open, back in 2019 when it was first hosted in Destin, Florida, where 19 lionfish were removed. But the 2020 event, as I've said on a number of occasions now, it was canceled. Well, it was postponed and eventually canceled. We still had a pre-tournament component, which allowed folks to go out on their own time and harvest lionfish, but there was no central events like there would normally be. And all those fish that were harvested in 2019 and 2020 were filleted and provided to local restaurants for them to showcase lionfish as a food fish. We worked with 14 different restaurants, providing them with over 1,000 pounds of lionfish. We provided them for free, but we expected them to serve it to the public at a price that was more than grouper and snapper and some of the other species that they have in the restaurant. And what they quickly learned is that they can sell lionfish at that premium, which encourages a lot of them to buy it even in times when we aren't having a tournament where we're providing them lionfish. So I'll give you an update on this last year, 2021. The pre-tournament starts in February, ran all the way until mid-May when the main event was. We had 145 registered participants, which was down from 2019. 2019, we had almost 200, but I suspect the reason why we had less participation wasn't necessarily because of COVID, but because of the poor weather. There's a lot of folks that wait to register until the week of the event to ensure that they're travel is good to go, and to ensure that the weather is going to be conducive to going offshore and actually harvesting lionfish. So because of that poor weather, I think we lost some participation. So fingers. And then, so last year we had a total of 10,250 lionfish removed, and that's combined between the main event and the pre-tournament. I think about 6,000 or so of them came during the main weekend. And I think the main incentive for getting so much participation is the amount of money and prizes that's involved. Just this last year, it was $65,000 in cash and prizes that were provided to participants. So Derbies abroad, there's been a lot of planning for a large Derby and festival in the island of Antigua. Unfortunately, again, COVID has put a stop to that, and we've been struggling to try and find a new date that works with their policies. We're hoping, very hopeful, that next November we'll be able to have that event finally. And as you heard from Eileen, the Mediterranean invasion is booming, and it's likely going to spur a lot of new derbies in the Mediterranean, or at least I hope so. And I really hope that I'll be able to make it over there and participate in some of them. All right, moving on to the ulcers that we started to see in late 2017. This is a picture of one of the fish swimming around on one of the reefs up off of Destin that has a pretty nasty ulcer on it. In 2017, we saw a significant amount of our catch presenting with ulcers like this or in other parts of their body. Shortly afterwards, we saw a population decline. While we can't blame that population decline on the ulcers, it seems to line up with this disease certainly having an effect on the population. Every fall, we see lionfish with ulcers, or at least a higher percentage of this. While we see them throughout the entire year, we see a major uptick in the fall. But, and here's a couple of publications that came from that, talking about the disease itself and the declines. But in 2021, this last fall, we really didn't see that uptick like we normally see. And because of this, we've actually started to see a number of reef sites that are in that 70 lionfish per site number, where, back in 2018, that was very normal, if not higher. So we don't know if these numbers are going to persist, or if we're going to see another crash maybe next fall. Maybe the disease has run its course. Maybe lionfish are immune to it. We don't really know, but we do monthly monitoring, so we're going to keep doing this at least through next fall to see what happens. So with that, I'm going to open up any questions. I know we have a couple other presentations, so maybe at the end.
Hey, Alex, thank you so much for bringing that information to us from DEMA at the floor there. We really appreciate that. And like our good friend Rachel Bowman says, you can have fun, save the planet, and what more could you want? So check out these derbies and festivals. They are a blast. They're a lot of fun. There's a lot of them going on, as Alex was saying. So have a great time doing that. So we're going to go now to Anthony Valulis. And Anthony has been running this virtual Zoom room for us. And he is going to be giving us an update on what his organizations have been doing relating to the lionfish invasions. All right, off to Anthony.
Hey, thanks, Stacy. Let me just share my screen real quick. All right. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm just here to talk to you about my organization, Netless Catch, and what we're trying to do to help with the lionfish invasion, particularly when it comes to Caribbean and countries net area. So I know all of us really know about lionfish in general, what's happening with it, the fact it has no natural predators, its rapid reproduction, but something that we've noticed is how can we create a market-based solution around lionfish that can actually be beneficial to the livelihoods of people in areas that it's affecting, and at the same time also remove the lionfish to protect the reefs. So what we looked at is how we can work with countries in the Caribbean to catch lionfish and then export it to the United States. And so we're really building that supply chain that's being powered by artisanal fishermen throughout the Caribbean. Right now, we're starting in Belize. I'm very excited to say that in the last 2 months of just starting this process, we've gotten close to 4,000 pounds of lionfish, or around 7,920 actual lionfish. And we're looking to even expand this further and bringing it to other places such as Trinidad and Tobago, Cozumel, and really anywhere that we can work with artisanal fishermen to help provide their livelihood and help them really have an impact on the lionfish invasion. But one things we really focus on too in the areas that we go into to help with the lionfish invasion too is working with local partners and really keeping this as something that people in the country are making the contributions to the change with the lionfish invasion. So right here you can see one of our partners located in Belize, which is National Fishermen Cooperative. They have over 650 fishermen now that are all looking at going after lionfish as a possible way to supplement their income and even create new incomes for new fishermen who want to just focus on lionfish. And by doing this too, we can provide a quality fish too that's brought to the US that fits all the specifications of somewhere that was doing it within the States. But one of our big focus, as I've been talking about too, is not just on having these fishermen go after lionfish and paying for them, but really creating a community of these fishermen and really helping them in the ways that we can. In case there's other things too that develop in the future, we'll really connect with them and give them a better understanding of why it's important to hunt lionfish rather than just for the income that's providing. So we've been looking at providing spears for them, as well as looking at doing zookeepers and even GPSs for their boats so that they can better have an impact on the invasion and also just go after lionfish safely. And our focus when it comes to getting the fish to the United States is actually not really in the Florida area, but focusing outside that area where people that really want to try lionfish or learn more about it can actually have that opportunity to try it and understand why it's important too to go down to Florida and start hunting it, or go to Belize and start hunting it. So some of the areas too that we're actually going to be selling our lionfish is here in the Midwest, in Milwaukee area, Madison, Chicago, but also in other areas like Philadelphia, Boston, and some areas in California as well. And we kind of have an idea too of expanding what we're doing with lionfish to transform it as something that a lot of different people can try, but also focusing on other restorative methods that we can do for the ocean. We talked about looking at other invasives too and how we can apply this model of lionfish to those, but really just creating seafood that actually does good for the ocean. And that's Netless Catch and what we've been working on.
Thanks, Anthony. Fantastic. It's amazing the amount of opportunities that have been created by this invasion, and eating these fish is one of the most fun parts of this lionfish invasion. So thank you, Anthony, and send me some. I'm ready for a dip.
And Anthony, I do have a question for you. So if somebody wants to order lionfish, there's a good source that you have now. And what's the minimum amount somebody would have to buy, and what is the cost of that?
So we
Can
are
you ship it pretty much.
Yeah, we can ship it anywhere. So we are focusing more on the wholesale at the moment. So we're doing some exceptions for people that we know, but in general, working at a wholesale model to start with. But we hope to expand that to the average customer as well. And that's part of what we want to do with the CPG model too, is have something that you can go to your local grocery store or buy it from us directly and we can ship it and create stuff like lionfish tacos or other things that are more acceptable for people to try as a starting area of lionfish rather than seeing like the whole lionfish. Some people might get intimidated on trying that, but transferring to those products makes it more accessible. But that should be ready hopefully sometime next year.
Okay, was there anything else you wanted to cover on Netless Catch then? Or?
I don't think so. I mean, people can check out our website, which is just netlesscatch.com. And if someone does want to order 40 pounds, they can. The pricing, we have it around $8, but when people are just trying out, especially for a restaurant, we always work with them on pricing so they can, have that chance to explore it and let new customers try it.
That's awesome. Awesome. Well, Jim, did you have some, and thank you everyone so much. And Jim,
really, every year we do this, we keep being amazed at how it continues to expand into opportunities and new initiatives that show up. From where we met Steve in 2014 to where the trap research is now, and to have, I think, the incorporation of Eileen and the entire Mediterranean into this silver lining.
you.